At exactly 6:30 every evening, Richard Hale, a 68-year-old widower with neatly parted silver-grey hair, sat alone at the corner table of Maple Grove Café. Since his wife passed 3 years ago, dinner had become a silent routine. The café staff knew him well. He ordered the same meal, read the newspaper slowly, and left precisely at 7:15. But on a rainy Thursday evening, everything changed. The bell above the café door chimed, and a woman walked in who seemed out of place in the small town. Her name was Elena Moretti, 64 years old, with shoulder-length dark chestnut hair streaked lightly with silver, striking grey eyes, and a confident yet graceful posture. She wore a long beige coat, pearl earrings, and carried herself like someone who had lived in bigger cities. When she scanned the nearly full café, her eyes paused on Richard's empty chair across from him. "May I?" she asked softly, gesturing to the seat. Her voice was calm, warm, but carried something unreadable beneath it. Richard hesitated only a moment before nodding. That was the first evening he did not eat alone. Over the next weeks, Elena returned often. They talked about books, travel, and the quiet loneliness that comes after decades of marriage. Richard found himself smiling again, laughing again, feeling something he thought had been buried with his late wife. But not everyone was pleased. Richard's eldest son, Daniel Hale, 42 years old. Daniel had always been protective, some would say controlling. His younger daughter, Melissa Hale, 39, was even more suspicious. She worked in finance and trusted numbers more than people. And Elena did not add up. One Sunday dinner, Daniel placed a manila folder on the dining table in front of his father. "Before you get too serious," he said calmly, "you should know who she really is." Richard felt a chill crawl up his spine. Inside the folder were printed documents, property records, old business registrations, and one unsettling detail. Elena Moretti had changed her last name twice in the past 20 years. "Why would someone need to do that?" Melissa asked quietly. That night, Richard sat alone in his living room, staring at his phone. Elena had just sent a simple message. "We need to talk. It's important." Outside his house, a dark SUV idled across the street, its headlights off, engine running. And for the first time since meeting Elena, Richard felt something other than hope. He felt watched. Richard slowly pulled the curtain aside just an inch. The dark SUV remained parked under the shadow of a maple tree. He couldn't see the driver clearly, only the faint outline of someone sitting very still behind the wheel. His heart began to pound in a way it hadn't in years. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Elena. "Please don't trust anyone right now, not even family." Richard's fingers tightened around the phone. Why would she say that? And how did she know something was wrong tonight? The SUV's engine finally shut off. A car door opened softly. Richard stepped back from the window. Moments later, there was a knock at his front door. 3 firm, deliberate taps. Not hesitant, not friendly. Richard steadied himself and opened the door slightly. Standing there was Daniel. His son looked tense, jaw tight, eyes sharp. "Dad, we need to talk," Daniel said, pushing his way inside without waiting for an invitation. "Were you sitting outside?" Richard asked calmly. Daniel didn't answer directly. Instead, he glanced toward the window. "I just want to protect you," he said. "You don't know this woman like you think you do." Daniel revealed he had hired a private investigator 2 weeks earlier. According to the report, Elena had once been connected to a failed investment firm 15 years ago. Several elderly clients lost significant savings before the company mysteriously dissolved. Richard felt a sharp sting of doubt. He asked firmly. Daniel hesitated. "No. But that doesn't mean she wasn't involved." The next morning, Richard decided to confront Elena directly. He met her at Maple Grove Café, where she sat by the window in her beige coat, hands folded neatly in front of her coffee. But today, her expression was different, guarded. "Elena," Richard began gently, placing the folder on the table between them, "why didn't you tell me about the investment firm?" For a brief moment, her grey eyes darkened. Not with guilt, but with something closer to fear. Before she could answer, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and immediately went pale. "I was hoping this wouldn't happen," she whispered. Then she looked at Richard with urgency. "They found me." Who found you? He asked quietly. Elena lowered her voice. The men who ran that firm. I was their financial compliance officer. When I discovered they were targeting retirees and moving their savings offshore, I reported them anonymously. Her hands trembled slightly for the first time since he had met her. She explained that the company collapsed soon after her report, but the two senior partners were never convicted. One of them had sworn to ruin her life if she ever spoke publicly. That was when she changed her name, not to escape guilt, but to escape retaliation. Raced. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Elena's grey eyes softened. Because I didn't want your children digging into something that could put you in danger. Just then, through the cafe window, Richard noticed the same dark SUV slowly passing by. That evening, Melissa arrived at Richard's house unexpectedly. Unlike Daniel's aggressive concern, Melissa's tone was colder, controlled. "Dad," she said carefully, adjusting her glasses, "did she mention the lawsuit settlement from 10 years ago?" Richard froze. Elena had said nothing about a settlement. Melissa placed new documents on the table. According to the records, Elena had received a substantial payout connected to the failed firm. Why would someone get paid after exposing fraud? Melissa asked quietly. Doubt began creeping back into Richard's chest. The next day, Richard confronted Elena again. This time she didn't avoid his eyes. "The settlement wasn't a reward," she said firmly. "It was hush money. They wanted me to disappear quietly." She admitted she had taken it, not for herself, but to secretly reimburse 2 of the elderly victims. Before Richard could respond, his phone rang. It was Daniel. His voice sounded shaken. "Dad, someone broke into my office last night. They only searched one drawer, the one with Elena's file." Silence followed. Suddenly this wasn't just suspicion. It was escalation. That night, Richard made a decision his children did not expect. He invited Elena to stay at his house temporarily. Daniel argued fiercely. Melissa warned him it was reckless. But Richard stood straighter than he had in years. "You think I'm being manipulated," he said calmly. "But I see fear in her, not deception." 2 days later, police arrested one of the former firm partners in a neighboring state on unrelated financial charges. During questioning, authorities uncovered evidence linking him to intimidation attempts, including surveillance on Elena. The dark SUV had not belonged to Daniel. It had belonged to someone much more dangerous. Weeks later, as the investigation expanded, Richard sat once again at Maple Grove Café, but this time, Elena sat across from him, her hand resting gently over his. Daniel and Melissa had apologized, shaken by how close the threat had come. Richard looked at Elena and realized love at 68 wasn't foolish. It was brave. His children had other plans, but the truth had plans of its own.